Something is in your way. You have been staring at it, going around it, cursing it. But you have not asked the one question that matters. What if it is not in your way at all? Welcome to the Stoic Compass. I am EPICTETUS, and today I am joined by Carl Jung and LAOZI. Today we are examining, does the obstacle itself contain the lesson or only your response to it? I will tell you what I think and I will not soften it. The obstacle is not the teacher. You are the teacher. The obstacle is just a wall. It has no opinion about you, no intention toward you, no wisdom waiting inside its stones. What you do when you hit it, that is where everything lives. Stop worshiping the difficulty as though it is a sacred text. It is not. It is a condition. And what you do with a condition is the only thing that has ever been in your hands.
I hear the force in that, Epictetus, and I understand why you say it. But I wonder if you are collapsing something important. The obstacle does not speak, no, you are right about that, but it reveals. Perhaps the more precise question is this: why does this obstacle appear to this person at this moment? One might say the obstacle and the person who encounters it are not as separate as you suggest. The wound that gets triggered by a particular difficulty is not random. It is old, it is specific, and it has been waiting.
You are both starting from the same assumption, that the obstacle is a problem to be accounted for. Epictetus says the problem is in the response. Jung says the problem is in the history behind the response. But neither of you has asked whether calling it an obstacle at all is already the first mistake.
That is a lovely sidestep. Call it what you want, LAOZI. When a man loses his job, when a woman gets a diagnosis, when a city burns, there is something real in front of them that they did not choose. You can rename it. You cannot make it disappear with a better frame. What I am saying is that the lesson is not in the thing. It is in how you stand.
And yet how you stand is shaped by forces you may not be fully aware of. I have sat with people who were convinced they were responding with clarity and courage, only to discover that their response was entirely constructed by an old fear they had never named. The obstacle became a screen onto which they projected everything they refused to examine. In that case, Epictetus, would you say the lesson was in their response? Because their response was, in a sense, a lie they were telling themselves without knowing it.
Yes, this is closer to the real question, but I would put it differently. When you encounter resistance, the first thing that happens is that you become more yourself. Not your best self, not your wisest self, simply more of whatever you already are. The obstacle does not teach you anything new, it shows you what was already there.
That I can agree with, and that is exactly why the response is everything. If the obstacle shows you what is already there, the question is, do you examine what it shows you, or do you flinch and walk away? The man who flinches learns nothing from his response either. He just confirms his own weakness and goes back to sleep. The lesson requires that you actually look.
But look at what? That is the crux, is it not? You keep saying, look at your response. I am saying, look at what generated the response. There is a layer beneath the response that most people never reach because it is uncomfortable. It is shadowed. I have seen brilliant, disciplined people who would satisfy even your standards, Epictetus, who responded to an obstacle with tremendous apparent clarity. And yet the same obstacle appeared again 6 months later in a different form, because they addressed the surface and left the root untouched.
The root? Yes, but I am not sure the root is buried the way you describe it, Jung. Sometimes the root is not hidden at all. Sometimes it is completely visible, and people simply will not look at it, because looking at it would mean they would have to stop. Stop pushing, stop fighting, stop performing the effort that they have decided is the same as virtue.
Stopping is not the answer. I will say that plainly. The Stoic does not stop. The Stoic keeps moving, but with eyes open. You make it sound as though the solution is to sit still until the obstacle dissolves. That is not wisdom, that is abdication.
I did not say sit still, I said stop performing the effort. There is a difference. A man digging at frozen ground with a wooden spoon is not practicing discipline. He is practicing something that looks like discipline from the outside and feels like it from the inside, but is actually just noise.
That image lands, LAOZI. I think what you are describing in psychological terms is the difference between genuine engagement and what I might call compensatory striving. The person who cannot bear to feel helpless will manufacture a response, any response, rather than sit with the discomfort of not knowing what to do. The obstacle becomes an occasion for activity rather than an occasion for understanding.
Now you are both sliding towards something I want to push back on. You are making it sound as though understanding is the goal. Understanding is not the goal. The goal is to live well in the face of conditions you did not choose. I do not need to know the entire history of my psychology to decide how to conduct myself today. That is the trap of analysis. It can become infinite. There is always another layer. At some point, you have to act.
Of course you have to act. But acting without understanding is how the same obstacle recurs. I am not suggesting endless analysis as a substitute for living. I am suggesting that a single honest look at what is beneath the surface is worth more than 1,000 disciplined responses built on top of a wound that never heals.
You are both describing the same person from different angles. EPICTETUS, you are looking at what the person does. JUNG, you are looking at what the person carries. I am wondering about something neither of you has touched. What if the obstacle appears not because the person has a wound, and not because they need to develop discipline, but because something in the situation has simply reached its limit? Not every obstruction is a message. Sometimes the path was wrong.
Now that is an interesting provocation. But how do you know when the path is wrong versus when you are simply not strong enough to walk it yet? That question matters. Because if a man quits every time the road gets hard and tells himself the path was wrong, he will spend his life rationalizing retreat.
You ask how he knows. I think he knows when the effort stops producing any movement at all, and when even the effort itself has begun to feel hollow. Not tired, hollow. Those are different things.
There is something in what LAOZI is saying that connects to a pattern I have observed repeatedly. The person who cannot distinguish between exhaustion and wrong direction is usually someone who has never sat quietly enough to feel the difference. They have been running at full speed for so long that the only signal they can receive is keep going or stop. The more subtle signal, which might be this is not the right wall to break through, that signal requires some inner quiet to hear.
Inner quiet requires that you have first done the work of getting your judgments right. You cannot just sit quietly and wait for revelation. You have to train the faculty of judgment first. Then the quiet is useful. Without the training, quiet is just more confusion at a lower volume.
I think you are right that most people cannot use stillness well, but I disagree that the solution is more training before the stillness. Sometimes the training is the problem. The person has trained themselves to push, and now they cannot stop pushing even when pushing is what is keeping them stuck.
Perhaps the question is not whether the lesson is in the obstacle or in the response, but whether the person is capable of receiving any lesson at all. Not because they lack intelligence or willpower, but because the receiving requires a kind of openness that is very difficult when you are in pain. The obstacle in that sense tests not just your response, but your capacity to let the response actually teach you something, rather than defend against it.
That is actually the first thing you have said, Jung, that I would not argue with. The question is not whether the lesson is available. The question is whether you are the kind of person who can receive it. And that comes back to what I have been saying from the beginning. The work is in you, not in the wall.
The wall does not care whether you learn from it. The wall is a wall. But you stood in front of it, and now something is visible that was not visible before. Whether that visibility is useful depends entirely on whether you are willing to see it clearly instead of immediately deciding what to do about it.
Agreed. But deciding what to do about it is still the end of the road. The clarity leads somewhere. It does not just float there in the air.
The clarity leads somewhere, yes. But I would say it leads somewhere different, depending on whether you have understood what generated the obstacle in the first place. And by generated, I do not mean caused in a mechanical sense. I mean, why this? Why now? Why does this particular wall appear in this particular person's path? That question is not mysticism, it is diagnosis.
You are both still trying to solve the obstacle. I am suggesting something different. Not acceptance in the passive sense, not endurance in the disciplined sense. Simply, for a moment, what is actually here. Not what it means, not what to do about it. Just what is actually here.
That moment is useful. I grant you that moment, but only a moment. Because the person still has to eat, still has to work, still has a life to live. Philosophy that ends at the moment of perception and never arrives at conduct is incomplete.
And psychology that ends at conduct without reaching the source is, I would say, equally incomplete. We are perhaps describing different phases of the same process, but the order matters. The perception that LAOZI describes, then the excavation I describe, then the conduct you describe. In that sequence, something is actually transformed. Reversed, you get repetition.
Water does not decide to reach the sea. It simply moves where the ground allows it. There are people who have spent years engineering their response to obstacles and are no closer to where they need to be. And there are people who simply stopped redirecting themselves long enough to notice which way the ground already slopes.
Pretty, but water does not have to answer for its life. You do, I do. That is the difference that matters. You have heard 3 arguments, and none of them is wrong, and none of them is enough. Something simpler is underneath all of them.
Here is what I want you to hear, not as a philosopher, not as a theorist, but as someone who has spent years sitting with people who were stuck. The obstacle itself is not the lesson, but it is not neutral either. When something stops you, it does not just reveal your character, it reveals your pattern. And your pattern is older than this moment. It was shaped long before you arrived at this particular wall. Most people, when they hit an obstacle, do one of 2 things. They push harder or they walk away. Both of those are responses. Neither of them is understanding. Understanding requires that you stop long enough to ask, have I been here before? Not the same obstacle in the same form, but the same feeling, the same tightening, the same impulse to push or flee. Because if the answer is yes, then the obstacle is not just a problem. It is a signal. Something in you has not yet been seen clearly, and the world has arranged itself to keep showing you until you look. This is not mysticism. It is pattern recognition applied honestly to your own life. Today, try this. Think of one obstacle in your life right now. Do not try to solve it. Ask one question instead. When have I felt this exact feeling before? Not the situation. The feeling. Write down the first honest answer that comes. Do not edit it. Just look at it. That is where the lesson actually is.
The obstacle does not owe you a lesson. The world is not organized around your education. But you are watching yourself right now, in how you respond and in what you refuse to examine, and in whether you keep running at the same wall and calling it perseverance. That is the only thing in front of you that is genuinely yours. The wall will still be there tomorrow. The question is whether you will be the same person standing in front of it, or someone who finally looked. If today's conversation has served you, take it further. Pay Attention by C. Trebu, 12 Lessons in the Practice of Seeing Clearly. Available now on Amazon.